programmes, and I'll just introduce my colleague here, Ian Ennis, who is the course leader for religious and moral education.
Thank you very much, Leah. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Getting into the Teaching webinar series. And this particular session is related to religious and moral education and RME. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ian Ennis, and I'm the PGDE Secondary RME Coordinator. I'm also a teaching fellow in the School of Education. I teach, as you can see, on the PGDE Secondary. I also teach religious and moral education on the undergraduate course. That's the BAPE teaching course, which is a BA in primary education. So welcome. If you wish to contact us, if you wish to make further inquiries, particularly that are specific to religious and moral education, then you're very welcome to contact us at the address below, which is #pginquiries@strath.ac.uk. Okay, so let's get started. What I want to do is I want to talk at some points quite generally about the School of Education itself, and then I'm going to get down to some specifics. Okay, so I'll just want to move the question and answer box out of the way. So a little bit about the School of Education. As you can see here, that the School of Education or Strathclyde University itself began in 1837 by David Stowe. And this was situated in the Dundas Vale Normal Seminary to train teachers. So this is just under 200 years ago. Now in 1913, in relation to the School of Education, we moved to the Jordan Hill campus, which is in the West End of Glasgow. In 1993, we remained in the School of Education at Jordan Hill, and we became the faculty, we became the School of Education with Strathclyde University itself. So there was an amalgamation there. Now in 2012, we moved to the city centre, to the campus-built School of Education, and we're situated on Cathedral Street, and we're very much at the heart of Strathclyde University life. Okay, we have alumni all over the world, and we are very, very proud to say that we are ranked the 6th in the UK in the 220 Complete University Guide. And as I say there, that is something that we are incredibly proud of. Okay. So let's just have a look at your teaching journey, as it were. So if you're considering applying for the PGDE course, whether this is PGDE primary or PGDE secondary, you will have an undergraduate degree, which has lasted perhaps 3 to 4 years. You will then, if you're successful at interview, you will then undertake the Professional Graduate Diploma in Education, PGDE, which lasts for approximately 10 months. And at this point, you will be provisionally registered. If you're successful on the course, you go into the Teacher Induction Scheme, and there you will be fully registered. It is interesting that when you go on to the probationary year, there is the opportunity for you to take a more flexible route when you're in probationary year, and it isn't necessarily the case that you have to complete your full registration within 1 year. So just an overview of timings, etc. So the course itself is 36 weeks, and it normally begins at the third week in August. So a 36-week course beginning the 3rd week in August. There are 18 weeks on campus, as it were, with learning and teaching, and there are 18 weeks on placement. And I'll talk about how those weeks are distributed further on in this set of slides. You will be accredited by the General Teaching Council of Scotland if you are successful, which will allow you to teach in Scottish schools. And you have the opportunity to amass 120 credits available at master's level that will then allow you if you are, when you go into teaching, to carry on with further study, as it were, so that you can complete your Master of Education. Okay. So just a little bit about the course structure itself. There are 3 major modules. We have professional learning through inquiry, educational studies and professional values, and professional skills, curriculum and pedagogy, and professional practice. Now, it is these professional skills and the skills that come from curriculum and pedagogy that I'm going to be speaking about with you in a few moments. So I'm going to be exploring curriculum and pedagogy from the perspective of religious and moral education. And those candidates or applicants who are applying or who have applied for religious and moral education in the non-denominational sector. Okay. If you can give me 1 second, thank you. So in relation to a secondary PGDE, there are 2 placements in 2 different schools. So for example, in your first school, School A, you go out for 8 weeks in semester 1. And in your second school, that we've called School B at the moment, you're going out for 10 weeks in semester 2. So you can see at this point that 18 weeks is actually distributed over 2 placements. So the 18 weeks of placement time is distributed over 2 schools. And then we have those 18 weeks within the School of Education itself, which is interdispersed between these 2 placements. So a little bit more about, or a little more, excuse me, about assessment itself. I just want to move the question and answer again. So let's have a look at this. So there are 3 steps in assessment. We have the placement experience itself, and this is when you go out into school. And this assessment is a partnership assessment because it's an assessment between the School of Education and the school that you're going to be on placement. And that partnership itself is from, for example, when I go out and observe your teaching, I would observe your teaching with the teacher of RME or the mentor who's looking after you while you're out on placement. Okay. What also happens is that an external examiner samples tutors' assessment so that we have equity and for quality assurance, as it were. Okay, so that's the placement experience where you would go out into school for the 2 placements, and the partnership itself is between the School of Education and the school itself, and focusing on the partnership between myself and the student's mentor. So the assessment of other modules, there are a variety of approaches to PGDE at master's levels. We have assignments, there are presentations, there are academic posters, and there are no examinations. So what we want you to be aware of here, that the assessment for the 3 core modules, you know, the assessments are very creative. You are doing some essay writing, absolutely, some academic essay writing, but you will be involved in other forms of assessment. For example, you would be involved in a single presentation or perhaps group presentation. Sometimes we ask you to put together an academic poster, as it were. So the approaches are very creative, just as those approaches should be creative within the school setting, those approaches to teaching and learning. So the 3rd step, exploring coursework and attendance. Students choose whether to submit at diploma level, or they choose whether they want to submit at master's level. So what happens there, you have to achieve 120 credits in either diploma or master's level so that we can award you the PGDE. Okay, and those 20 credits come from the placement experience itself and the assessment of other modules. Okay. A little bit more background information. There is a possibility, for example, for you to hold a teaching qualification in 2 subjects. We do have that facility and we can discuss that with you. So that you have a successful registration in both subjects. And perhaps it's the case with some of the PGDE secondary applicants. They're considering that perhaps they have a degree in religious studies in English, and we've had that dual qualification before, or perhaps dual qualification in religious studies and history, religious studies and psychology. And a couple of years ago, we had a student who was in fact completing the PGDE in religious studies and mathematics. So we have some flexibility for you there. Okay, we're just going to talk about the entry requirements. So the entry requirements for PGDE courses are based on the requirements set out by the General Teaching Council of Scotland, GTCS. So what do you need? You need a degree validated by a higher education institution in the United Kingdom, or a degree of an equivalent standard from an institution outside the United Kingdom. So the degree must contain at least 80 credits. Now, I'm going to talk about those 80 credits, which obviously are related to religious and moral education, religious studies and philosophy. So I will be talking about those quite soon, so we can get some specifics, as it were. So you must have higher English at grade C or above, or an equivalent. You must have National 5 mathematics at grade C or above, or an equivalent. Okay, so we're thinking about the appropriate degree. We're thinking about the appropriate level of English, the appropriate or the equivalent of higher English at grade C or above. And we're also thinking about the National 5 mathematics at grade C or above. And that's as far as those 3 areas are concerned. I know that admissions will be able to help you there with the appropriate qualification. We like to think that you have some experience of working with children in secondary or primary, in a school setting, a related context. And perhaps that comes in when you in your application, and in your personal statement, you're able to give us some insight there. Okay. That we want you to have an understanding of modern education. Now, some of you will have an understanding of it, because if you are 21 or 22 years of age, you've been in school, perhaps in Scotland. If you are older, or a so-called mature student, if I might say, then you might have that understanding of modern education, because perhaps you've been a teaching assistant, or you've been involved in education in other ways. And of course, we want that ability for you to be able to relate to people. So you can see there with the entry requirements, we have those official entry requirements, and we're also thinking about the skills and qualities that make for a good teacher, and in this instance, that make for a good teacher of religious and moral education. Okay. Now I want to talk about those specifics with you. So the entry qualifications, in line with the General Teaching Council of Scotland, and again, if you mind, I just want to put the question and answer box to one side. So applicants must have an undergraduate degree with at least 80 SCQF credit points from 2 or more of the areas listed below. So let's talk for a moment, let's just list these areas. So we have religious studies, we have philosophy, we have theology, we have divinity, we have sociology of religion, anthropology of religion, and psychology of religion. Okay, now what we want there is a combination of 2. 80 CQF credit points. So, for example, we have candidates and we have students at the moment who perhaps have 40 credits in philosophy, and they have 40 credits in religious studies. We have students who perhaps have 60 credits in philosophy and 20 credits in religious studies. And if we have those 20 credits in religious studies together with philosophy, then we can consider your application. It may be the case, for example, that you have 60 credits in philosophy, and in fact you have 20 credits in anthropology of religion. So you can see here that there are a number of ways that we can put these 80 CQF credits together. We have some flexibility there. And so this is taken from the memorandum on entry requirements to programs. So it would, let me give you some other insight as regards flexibility. Perhaps you have a degree in philosophy, and the majority of your the modules that you've covered in your degree are in philosophy, and there are none of them that are in religious studies. Now, one of the things that we ask you to do is you have the opportunity perhaps to do some distance learning, or perhaps through the Open University, for example. And what you may consider doing is 20 credits in religious studies, which will then link with your philosophy, which will then allow me to consider you for interview. And you are welcome to contact me. And at this moment in time, you're contacting me from the email that is on the first or the second slide. And I then will, your email will then be passed on to me. And I will be able to contact you. And sometimes it's the case, I can tell you, that we can have a short Zoom discussion, or we can have a short telephone discussion, and that will allow me to give, that will allow you to give me a little bit more insight into the degree, particularly if it's a degree perhaps that's related to, you've done some sociology, you've done some psychology, for example, but you've also done one or two modules in religious studies. So that discussion is always very, very helpful, I think, and it allows you to find out exactly where you stand. Okay. Now, so this is the process. You have the application. You can either apply through UCAS if you're in the United Kingdom or in the EU. For international students, you can apply through the university via Pegasus, and I'm sure that Leah would be able to give you more information there. Then we have document support. You can send your documents to HAS PGDE, okay, so that we have those documents within 21 days of submitting your application. So we've got your application, we can see the documents, and then that allows Leah and her colleagues to check your documentation with regards to your degree and with regards to your English and maths qualifications. Okay, so suitable candidates are then invited to interview, and at this moment in time, interview takes place online. It's through the Zoom domain, as it were, and in actual fact, I'm interviewing at the moment for the new session. And then a decision. Now, when the decision is made, okay, if it is a conditional offer, so for example, it might be on the condition that you must complete your degree by July of this year of 2020, or it might be the condition that you have to complete National 5 Maths or equivalent, and I'm sure that Leah will tell you that there is, in Aberdeen, for example, there is an online National 5 Maths course, or it may be the fact that you have to complete a higher equivalent, okay, and I know that Leah would be able to help you there. So the deadline, okay, for completing your degree, or completing your maths, or completing your English, if you need to do those things, is by the end of July of 2021. And so I hope I'm okay there, Leah, in saying that the deadline is normally the end of July 2021, which allows students to get the certificates, etc. Okay, I think we're doing quite well. On to the next slide. A little bit about fees and funding, and again, I'm sure that Leah is going to be able to give you further detail here. You can see here that Scottish students may be eligible for government funding for tuition fees. Eligibility criteria and application information can be found on the Student Awards Agency. Okay, so we know that money is important, finance is important. International, EU and the rest of the UK tuition fees for a PGDE are yet to be confirmed. When available, full fees will be published here. So we have some vital links for you here as regards finance, and the final link, in fact, is related to some of the scholarships that are available. So having these links and making a record of these links, I think, are important for you. But again, you would always be able to contact us, PGDE inquiries, who I know are very, very helpful and will be able to recall these links for you. Okay. So you can find helpful information on the course webpage. And as you can see, I haven't spoken too much about the three main modules itself, although I'm going to speak about one of them. So if you go to the relevant course webpage here, and you'll see some of the frequently asked questions, which I know will give you insight. So if you still need to get in touch, as I have said, email admissions or speak to an admissions officer on live chat and see the relevant course page for details. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak a little bit now about religious and moral education in Scottish schools, and religious and moral education from the perspective of the non-denominational sector. So what you must be aware of is that pupils applying to the School of Education for religious and moral education, did I say pupils there? I should have said applicants, as it were. Those applicants are applicants who are going to be teaching in non-denominational schools. And if we look at a curriculum for excellence, we see that there are principles and practices set up for RME, the teaching of religious and moral education in non-denominational schools, and for RERC, the teaching of religious education in Roman Catholic schools. So at this moment in time, I want to give you some clarity that students who are successful on the course who are successful gaining a place rather on the course, they come to me and they explore religious and moral education from the non-denominational perspective, and they go into non-denominational schools. But let me speak here in the spirit of diversity, because I work with my Roman Catholic colleagues at Glasgow University and beyond. And I am here to tell you that if you apply for the PGDE in RME and you come from the Roman Catholic sector, I am more than happy to interview you. And in fact, we have a number of Roman Catholic colleagues, candidates, or students, I should say, not doing very well there, students, and they are studying for PGDE in RME, but they are absolutely aware that when they complete the course, if they're successful on the course, then they have the opportunity to continue in the non-denominational sector or go into the Roman Catholic sector. So that diversity point is very important, that I'm here to tell you that under no circumstances can we offer you a Roman Catholic school, because I can't go and observe your teaching in a Roman Catholic school. But you do have that opportunity. I'm so glad to say that when you're successful at the end of the PGDE course, if you wish, you can then go into the Roman Catholic sector. Okay. So this rationale that I am talking about for religious and moral education, as you can see here, we're aware that Scotland is a nation whose people hold a wide range of beliefs from many branches of the Christian faith represented throughout the land to the world's other major religions and to beliefs which lie out with religious traditions. Such diversity enriches the Scottish nation, as you can see, and is thought-provoking. So what in a religious and moral education, what we are doing with our children, we are exploring beliefs, a diversity of beliefs. We are exploring Christian beliefs, Buddhist belief, Australian Aboriginal belief, humanist belief, utilitarian beliefs. So this approach is very diverse. It's a very equitable and balanced approach. What are we doing? We are exploring belief, whatever belief that happens to be. Okay. And you can see here that children and young people must become aware that beliefs and values are fundamental to families and to the fabric of society and communities. So we're looking at these beliefs and values and attitudes, and we can explore Christian values, Buddhist values, Aboriginal values, humanist values, the whole idea that humanists have faith not in God, but have faith in other humans, and their moral decision making is based on humanity and comes from humanity. So this diverse approach is one that we feel is a very equitable approach, is a very multicultural approach, is a very multi-beliefed approach, if I can use that term there. Okay, so let's just have a look at some of the learning objectives for PGDE secondary students who would be coming to me for curriculum and pedagogy all day Tuesday. And on Tuesday we would be focusing on the principles and practices for a religious and moral education as set out by a curriculum for excellence. And if you go to the principles and practices for RME, if you do a quick Google, you will see those principles and practices that are set out. So what is it for RME students? Well, they must demonstrate a broad knowledge of the content of the RME curriculum in the context of pupils' learning, where pupils are exploring beliefs, values, attitudes, issues, practices, and traditions. So demonstrating when you are undertaking the course within the School of Education, or whether in fact you're out on teaching practice, that you are developing pupils' learning and you're exploring beliefs and values and attitudes in perhaps relation to Christianity, in relation perhaps to Sikh culture, in relation to Islam in Scotland or in Glasgow or beyond, in relation to the Scottish Humanist Society. We are constantly exploring values. That's my key word, exploration. And it's how we're going to go about this exploration. So what also in our learning objectives, we're thinking about very current, modern, creative and progressive approaches to teaching and learning. Children aren't learning the stuff about religion. Children are exploring the content of belief, whatever that belief is, exploring the content of belief and faith. And what we need to ensure that exploration is stimulating, it's creative, it's diverse, pupils are, it's inclusive. Pupils are stimulated, are interested. So, how's this done? Well, it can be from project and project-based learning, some outdoor learning, some interdisciplinary approaches. So, for example, if we are exploring, let me give you one example here. We might be exploring the Sikh attitude to equality, as it were. And if we think about social studies, the whole exploration of what do we mean by equality and inequality and equity. We might be exploring an aspect of Jewish belief and faith, and in doing so, we may be exploring an element of aspects of the Jewish Holocaust, which would be explored in history, and we can be working together. And as always, as you will see from an interdisciplinary approach in everything that we do, and you will see this here in this final of this third statement here, everything that we do is underpinned by literacy. Indeed, we are literacy teachers. As teachers of RME or teachers of geography or teachers of physics, teachers of home economics, we are teachers of literacy because we need to deliver our curriculum so that pupils are developing literacy skills in RME. And if they're developing those various literacy skills in RME, then in fact they're developing the skills of discussion, they're developing the skills of short essay writing or extended essay writing, they're developing listening skills. So we are teachers of RME, but within RME, we're absolutely aware that not only literacy is underpinning RME, but numeracy is underpinning RME, and there are specific times in religious and moral education or with certificate work with religious, moral and philosophical studies where numeracy is key because it will allow our pupils to examine statistical information in helping them explore the moral issue. And always in RME, what we have is health and well-being, not just the physical, but the emotional well-being of our children who are exploring various beliefs and values and attitudes. Their mental and emotional well-being is a priority for the teacher of RME. Okay, we're nearly there. And I think I'm on to my final slide. So we can see here with the extended learning objectives, we want to, in RME, in curriculum and pedagogy, when you come to see me, we want to examine the aims and objectives for RME with specific reference to curricular and assessment guidelines. We need to develop an understanding of what are we assessing in RME? What is it exactly are we assessing? I am seeing that what we are assessing in RME are pupils' knowledge and understanding, but also pupils' skills. That's what we're, more than anything, the skills within RME, the ability to analyse text, the ability, for example, to take part in balanced debate and discussion, the ability to take part in project work and group project work, okay. So also, we need to look at some of the, identify some of the strategies and develop appropriate skills in supporting all our learners. One of the strategies that we're looking at is in relation to literacy, and that children are improving their literacy skills. Okay, and finally, we want to apply our knowledge of RME in the context of learning for sustainability and global citizenship, and closing the attainment gap. Now, what do I mean here? Well, as far as education for sustainability is concerned, education for sustainability is about justice, about compassion, about equality, about fighting inequality. So we have a massive role to play in global citizenship, human rights, etc. But we also have that role to play in closing the attainment gap, because if our children are successful in RME, they're developing literacy skills and indeed other skills that will help us in closing the attainment gap. Now, you must forgive me because I've gone on there, and I'm sure that Leah's wondering he's gone on for such a long time. I'm going to let go now. So Leah, that's me.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. That was very, very informative. I hope listening got lots out of that. So now we've got about 25 minutes. If anyone would like to ask a question, we're very happy to have a nice discussion here. I think that's what people get the most out of these sessions, is having a nice discussion. So we've had one question come in as you've been speaking, so we'll answer that first, but please, if you have any other questions, then just pop them into the chat box and we will come along to them. I don't know if you want to stop sharing your screen, Ian, and then people will be able to see you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you, are they seeing my desktop at the moment? That's better, that's much
there, that's better.
So would you like me to start with this first question in the...
Yes, so I'll read that out. So what type of schools are placements held? For example, do you offer placements in independent schools?
The answer to that is very easy. We do. I have a number of students. The situation is slightly different at the moment, but last term I had a number of students who were, some of them were in independent schools, and we use a number of independent schools. I'm thinking of some of the schools that we use in Edinburgh, the independent schools. And we have a great partnership with them, and some of the schools that, in fact, the independent schools that we use in Glasgow, and I'm sure that there are more that I have used, and we've developed some fantastic partnerships with our independent schools, and those partnerships are sometimes have been developed as a result of the fact that my students have been successful. They've gone into teacher training, they've then perhaps gone into an independent school, and they have then invited my students to take their placement. So yeah, that for us, it's a very equitable process and one of diversity. So we do offer placements in independent schools. There is one thing that I would like to say, Leah, just to give that more focus. It is very, very interesting because the process of offering, as I'm sure Leah will tell you, the schools are offered by the General Teaching Council of Scotland. This is, you know, we have a fantastic partnership with the General Teaching Council of Scotland. It is a formal partnership. What happens is that the General Teaching Council take our quota of students. So for example, if I have 25 students, they then find 25 places for those students. I have no say. You have no say. It isn't the case that a student says, well, I want to go to a Scottish state school or a comprehensive school or an independent school. Basically what happens, we have our 25 students, we give an X number of places which are offered from the General Teaching Council of Scotland. Okay,
Yes.
Leah.
Yes, I think it's very important to mention that. That's something that we get a lot of questions about. So maybe I could just add to that as well that so what Ian's just said about the General Teaching Council for Scotland deciding the places, that's not just for Strathclyde and it's not just for the RME students, that's for all of our PGDE students, and that's for all of the PGDE students at other institutions. So whether you're studying at Glasgow or at Edinburgh, they all go through the General Teaching Council for Scotland, and that's why you're not able to request a certain school. If you took a request for one person, you would have to take it for everyone, and it's just not feasible. So that's the reason for that. And also, you would be asked round about, it's usually in the late summer, you would be asked to enter in your details to, it's called the SPS system, and you would be asked to enter your details in there. That's based on your home address, and then your school is allocated on there. So I think it's a 90-minute round trip that you have to be able to make to visit your school. Now, some people will be very lucky and it might be a school that's 10 minutes down the road, and then someone else might be less lucky and they might have to travel up to 90 minutes to reach their school.
Although it's interesting, Leah, when you say that, I mean, as a teacher for many years, getting to school, I think that I live relatively near to the School of Education itself, as it were, but I'm taking a 1 hour and 5 minute train journey, as it were. Well, a combination of walking and train journey, and I think that I live relatively near to the School of Education, and it's sometimes the case of it as a teacher that in fact I've been travelling for 1.5 hours to get to school. That's sometimes the reality of it, as it were. Now, there's another question, Leah, that's come up here. Would you like me, do you want to read that out, Leah, did you say?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have another one. As a non-Scottish potential RME student, how much of the SQA should I be aware of?
Now, that's very easy, or very straightforward, because as a non-Scottish student, you may have absolutely no understanding of the Scottish Qualifications Authority. But that's absolutely fine as far as we are concerned, because again, giving you a little bit more detail, the subject itself, as you know, is referred to as religious and moral education RME. Everybody goes about saying RME. Now, apart from the one period of RME that all pupils have in secondary, from S1 to S4, and sometimes from S1 to S5, that one period a week of RME, there are students who are in S3 and S4 and S5 and S6 who are studying for certificate work. So those students, so the students who are perhaps in S3 and S4 are studying for National 4 and National 5 religious, moral and philosophical studies. And I think that that particular anonymous attendee, if you write down now RMPS, SQA, and if you Google that, you will get much information about the arrangements, okay? But don't worry about that, because that will give you some insight. So we have this one period of RME per week from S1 to S4, sometimes from S1 to S5, and we have students in S3 and S4 who are studying for National 4 and 5, religious, moral and philosophical studies, RNPS, and you will find out about the content of religious, moral and philosophical studies at National 4 and 5. And then we have higher, as it were, higher RNPS, and we have advanced higher RNPS as well. Now, from S3, S4, S5 and S6, where I've talked about nationals and higher there, the course itself is in three areas. We look at the study of a religion. There's something that we call religious and philosophical questions, which is obviously relating to the philosophy of religion. And then we have a section called morality and belief, and that's where pupils are exploring various moral issues from the perspective of various beliefs. But if you have no understanding of SQA, of religious, moral and philosophical studies, you should not be worried about it, because when you come to me on a Tuesday, the whole day, and there are other sessions that you have with me, we begin to explore RME first of all. How do we teach? How do we deliver religious and moral education in the classroom? How do we explore these beliefs and values and attitudes, which are both religious and independent of religious belief? Let's look at the planning and resourcing there. And once we have, we're developing our resourcing skills and planning skills, we can then go on to examine how are we going to explore at National 4 and National 5 and at higher. But these things are taken one step at a time. And just finally for that question, and perhaps for others who are about, I mean, it really is the case that when you go out on teaching practice, what I just want you to be aware of is no one throws you in at the deep end. I mean, the partnership we have with the School of Education, with all our schools, and the very formal partnership, and I'm sure that Leah would agree here, there's nothing ad hoc. I don't phone a school and say, can you take a student? That does not happen. The partnership that we have means that when you go into school, in the first week or so of your placement, you are not teaching, you are observing teaching, and in fact you're undertaking many other activities in relation to not just pupils, in relation to teachers, in relation to the management of school, in relation to the health and well-being of pupils, and in relation to the associated primary schools. Okay, Leah.
Absolutely. I think as well, maybe just to add to that, that the PGDE programme attracts students from all over the world, because the PGDE itself is a global qualification. So you can, once you've achieved your teaching qualification, you can then teach in many other countries around the world, and that gives you the opportunity to then be studying with people who've come from a variety of backgrounds, a variety of nationalities, and then who may have went through many different qualifications throughout their life in different school systems, and you can learn from each other, and use that opportunity to learn about the different school systems across the world.
Of course, and that is that unique feature of the Scottish education system. It is a very unique feature that you have the opportunity to go and teach in other countries. Also, with the Scottish education system, or should I actually say with the PGDE course at Strathclyde, you get the opportunity to work within RME and with all the subject areas. You do get that opportunity to work with our international students. And at the moment on the RME course for secondary, we do have a number of international students. So the cultural mix is fantastic, and it promotes diversity. And that's what RME is about, absolutely.
Great. So it looks like that's all of our questions. We can give it another wee minute just in case anyone has any other questions to come through to us.
Okay.
I'd be happy to do that. Perhaps just, oh, here's another one. Once a student graduates from the RME PGDE programme and has registered for full registration, how much does the university help?
Now, I think I need perhaps a little bit more clarity on that. So student graduates, excellent, from the RME programme and has registered for full registration. How much does the university help? Now, is that a question? How much does the university help in getting the student into a job, perhaps? I'm wondering whether it's that, Leah. Do you think
that's what I'm picking up from that? Yes,
thank you.
Confirming yes. Okay. or he, sorry, he or she.
So, we do know, and maybe Leah would be able to tell us a little bit more, but from our UK students, what happens is that if you are successful, then you then get a 1-year probation, a 1-year probation in school. Let me give you a little bit more detail there. Okay, so what normally happens is round about December, when you've been on the module, you've been on the PGDE course for about 3 months or so, you're out in school, and round about December, I think, you're then asked by the General Teaching Council of Scotland to complete a form and to say, when you go out onto probation, if you're successful, what particular education authority would you like to go to? So what you do, you have to prioritize. So maybe you say that, well, I'd like to be, first of all, I'm going to put Glasgow down first of all, and then I'm going to put South Lanarkshire down as my second, and then I'm going to put North Lanarkshire down as my third, and then perhaps there's a fourth. So there's the prioritizing, and what the General Teaching Council of Scotland try to do is to get you a probationary position in the education authority, or in an education authority that's relatively near. Now, when we say relatively near, it's quite interesting, because if you live in one side of Glasgow and you've put down for Glasgow, you may get a school in Glasgow. So if you're in the south side of Glasgow and you get a school in the west end of Glasgow and you're driving, that really is going to take you an hour sometimes. Would you agree with me there, Leah?
Unfortunately, due to traffic, yes, it might.
Now, it's quite interesting that if you're on the south side of Glasgow and you've applied for you don't get Glasgow, but you get South Lanarkshire, you can be in a South Lanarkshire school within 10 minutes. So this is related to the boundaries. So that's the first thing that I want you to be aware of. So, but there's another thing that you can do. If you decide not to prioritize the education authorities and tick a box that says, I'll go anywhere, what might happen is you're a student and you're living in Glasgow and you're going to go on to probationary in August of this year, and you've ticked anywhere box. Now, when you tick the anywhere box, there is actually substantial financial remuneration for you ticking that anywhere box. I'm not sure altogether, Leah, but I think it's at least £6,000 over the top of the probationary wage. Now, you tick that box. Now, you may end up in the Highlands, or you may end up in the Outer Hebrides, as it were. But for ticking that box, you might actually just end up in Glasgow. So So I hope I've answered that question for you, anonymous attendee. There is some real flexibility there. So you get your teaching done, and as well, you're doing your